The package hit me square in the chest before I could even process what was happening. Shattered glass ornaments scattered across the snow like broken promises, each handmade Christmas light I'd spent weeks crafting now lying in pieces at my feet. My mother stood in the doorway, her face twisted with contempt I'd seen too many times before. "You think this cheap garbage is worth anything," she spat. "You've always thought you were special, royalty, but you're nothing. You hear me?" Nothing. Pearl appeared behind her, arms crossed, that smirk I knew so well plastered across her face. "Stop wasting your time on us. We don't need your trash." The words hit harder than the package. This was Christmas Eve. I'd driven 6 hours through a snowstorm to bring them gifts I'd made with my own hands, and they literally threw them back in my face. But here's the thing. That moment, as brutal as it was, became the catalyst for the most powerful transformation of my life. What happened next changed everything. Before I continue, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever been the one who gives everything and gets nothing in return, hit that like button. Subscribe because this story gets wild, and drop a comment telling me if you've ever had a moment that made you finally say enough is enough. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this ends. Let me take you back to the beginning to understand how I ended up standing in that driveway with broken ornaments at my feet and my heart shattered into even smaller pieces. I was born Royalty Marie Boulder on a freezing February morning in 1991, and yes, that's my real name. My parents, Daniel and Margaret Boulder, thought it was aspirational. My father was a mid-level manager at a logistics company, my mother a real estate agent who spent more time networking at country clubs than actually selling houses. They wanted their children to have names that meant something, names that would open doors. For me, they chose royalty, believing it would set me apart, make me destined for greatness. The irony of how they'd treat me throughout my entire childhood still cuts deep. My earliest memories are normal enough. Birthday parties with homemade cakes, summer vacations to nearby lakes, my mother braiding my hair before school. I was their only child for 3 blissful years, and while they weren't perfect parents, they were present. They showed up. They cared. Then Pearl arrived. Pearl Elizabeth Boulder was born on a sunny May morning, and from the moment she entered the world, she was golden. Literally. She had these perfect blonde ringlets where my hair was straight and mousy brown. She had bright blue eyes where mine were a muddy hazel. She was petite and delicate where I was tall and gangly. And most importantly, she was easy. She rarely cried. She smiled at everyone. She was the kind of baby that strangers stopped to coo over in grocery stores. I remember being 3 years old, standing next to Pearl's crib, watching my mother gaze at her with this expression of pure adoration. Even at 3, I recognized that she'd never looked at me quite that way. But I told myself I was being silly, that I was just jealous that it would pass. It didn't pass. It got worse. By the time I was 5 and Pearl was 2, the pattern was established. Pearl's baby book was immaculate, filled with photos and milestone notes and locks of hair. Mine had a few scattered pictures from the first year and then nothing. Pearl's room was a princess paradise in pink and white. My room was whatever leftover furniture they could squeeze in there. Pearl got new clothes. I got hand-me-downs from cousins. At 5 years old, I was already learning to be invisible. School became my refuge. I was good at it, naturally gifted in ways that surprised my teachers. I could read by 4, was doing 3rd grade math by 1st grade, and had a particular talent for art that my kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Chen, recognized immediately. She told my parents I was gifted, that I should be in advanced programs. They smiled and nodded and did nothing. Pearl needed speech therapy for a minor lisp, and that's where their focus went. Pearl's needs always came first. My 10th birthday was the first time I truly understood how little I mattered. Mom asked me what I wanted to do, and I said I wanted to go to the art museum downtown. There was a special exhibit on architectural design that I was desperate to see. She said maybe we'd see, she'd check the schedule. The day of my birthday arrived, and she made cupcakes from a box, mixed the kind with the chemical aftertaste that coated your tongue. She stuck a single candle in one and called everyone to the kitchen. We sang happy birthday for maybe 45 seconds before Pearl, who was 7 and absolutely knew better, started whining that she wanted to watch her favorite show. It was a rerun. She'd seen it a dozen times. But she wanted it on right now, and she started that particular whine that she'd perfected, the one that could shatter glass and parental resolve in equal measure. "Oh, honey, just let her watch her show," Mom said, already walking toward the TV. "We can have cake after." But we didn't have cake after. Pearl's show led to another show, then she wanted a snack, then she wanted to play outside, and suddenly it was dinner time and my birthday was over. The cupcakes sat on the counter, the candle never relit. I ate one alone in my room that night, and it tasted like ashes and disappointment. 3 months later was Pearl's 8th birthday. My parents rented out a community center. They hired a catering company that set up a full princess-themed party, complete with a castle bounce house, a face-painting station, a balloon artist, and a magician who did a 45-minute show. Pearl wore a custom-made princess dress that cost more than my entire school wardrobe. There were 50 kids there, most of whom Pearl barely knew their parents invited because of their social status or my mother's real estate connections. There was a 3-tier cake from the most expensive bakery in Boulder. The party lasted 5 hours. I helped set up at 6 in the morning, carrying tables and chairs, hanging decorations, setting out plates and napkins. I helped serve food, clean up spills, and manage the gift table. At the end, when everyone had left and Pearl was exhausted and happy in the back seat of the car, surrounded by hundreds of dollars worth of presents, my parents finally addressed me. "Thanks for helping today, royalty," Dad said absently, not even looking at me in the rearview mirror. That was it. No acknowledgement of the disparity. No recognition that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't fair. I was 12 years old and already learning that my role in this family was to facilitate Pearl's happiness, not to have any of my own. Middle school was rough for different reasons. I was awkward, too tall, too smart, too intense about things like art and design. I didn't fit in with the popular kids, and I didn't quite fit in with the nerds either. I existed in this strange middle space, mostly invisible, which honestly prepared me well for my home life. Pearl, meanwhile, sailed through elementary school on charm and looks and our mother's aggressive PTA involvement. She wasn't particularly bright, struggled with anything requiring sustained effort, but she was likable and pretty, and that seemed to be enough. I threw myself into my studies and my art. If I couldn't be loved, I could at least be excellent. I joined every art program available, spent hours in the school's studio, and started winning local competitions. In 8th grade, I won my first major award for a mixed media piece exploring themes of invisibility and family. The irony wasn't lost on me. The award came with a $500 prize, which I never saw. My parents deposited it into a savings account for college that Pearl would eventually drain to fund her first car. High school was when things shifted slightly. I grew into my height, figured out my hair, and developed a style that was more intentional. I still wasn't popular, but I had a small group of friends who got me, who valued my weird intensity and artistic vision. I took every advanced art and design class available. I was the editor of the school newspaper, designing all the layouts. I was recruited to help design sets for the theater department. I was building a portfolio that would eventually get me into top design schools. My junior year, I entered a statewide competition for young designers. The challenge was to create a design proposal for a community center that would serve a diverse, low-income neighborhood. I spent 3 months on my project researching community needs, interviewing people at local centers, creating detailed architectural drawings and 3D models. My design incorporated flexible spaces that could serve multiple functions, natural lighting to reduce energy costs, and materials that were both durable and beautiful. It was the best work I'd ever done. I won. Out of 347 entries from across Colorado, my design was selected as the winner. The prize was a $10,000 college scholarship, a feature in the state's architectural magazine, and an invitation to present my design at the annual Colorado Design Summit in Denver. The award ceremony was on a Saturday evening in early November. I told my parents about it the day I found out I'd won, a full 6 weeks in advance. I reminded them weekly. I put it on the family calendar. I asked them to mark it down. They assured me they wouldn't miss it. That same Saturday, Pearl's middle school was doing a fall talent show. Pearl had decided 2 weeks before that she wanted to perform a dance routine she'd learned from TikTok. She'd practiced it maybe a dozen times total. It was 3 minutes long. Her slot in the show was at 7 p.m. My awards ceremony started at 6:30 and would be over by 8. The venues were 20 minutes apart. There was no logistical reason they couldn't attend both or split up, so I'd have at least one parent there. I should have known better. The day of the ceremony, I spent the afternoon getting ready, putting on the one nice dress I owned that I'd bought with money from my part-time job at a local coffee shop. I printed out extra copies of my design boards in case anyone wanted to see them up close. I was nervous and excited in equal measure. This was a big deal, the kind of thing that would look incredible on college applications. At 5 p.m., I came downstairs with my portfolio case ready to leave. Dad was putting on his coat. So was Mom. But they were wearing Pearl's school colors. "You're going to Pearl's thing," I said flatly. Honey, you understand, don't you? Mom said, not quite meeting my eyes. Pearl is so nervous. She really needs us there. You're older, you're more confident. You'll be fine on your own. This is a major award. I'm giving a presentation in front of hundreds of people, including college recruiters and professional architects. And you'll be wonderful, Dad said, jingling his keys. We'll celebrate when you get home. Pearl's show will be quick. We should be back by 9. They left. Pearl didn't even say goodbye, too busy checking her makeup in the hallway mirror. I stood in the empty house for 10 minutes trying not to cry, trying to convince myself that it didn't matter. But it did matter. It mattered so much that I felt like I was suffocating. I drove myself to Denver. I sat in the parking lot for 15 minutes calling my best friend Ashley, who talked me through the panic attack I was having. Then I walked into that conference hall alone, found my seat, and waited for my name to be called. When they announced me as the winner, I walked up to that stage, accepted the award, and gave my presentation to a room full of strangers. I smiled for the photos, shook hands with the judges, and made small talk with the college recruiters who were suddenly very interested in me. The local newspaper ran a story the following week with a photo of me holding my award. My parents never read it. It sat on the kitchen counter for 3 days before my mother used it to line the recycling bin. When I got upset about it, she said, "Oh, honey, I'm sorry. I didn't know you wanted to keep it, but it's just a newspaper. They'll probably run more articles about you later." They never came to another one of my events. Not my art shows, not my senior presentation, not my graduation from the advanced design program where I was the only student to receive highest honors. Pearl had a volleyball game. Pearl had a friend's party. Pearl had a bad day and needed them. There was always something more important. College applications rolled around, and I had my pick of schools. Rhode Island School of Design wanted me. Pratt wanted me. Art Center wanted me, but they all came with price tags my parents made clear they wouldn't help with. I'd saved every penny from my coffee shop job, had the scholarship money from various competitions and awards, but it wasn't enough for the expensive private schools. I needed to stay in state somewhere with lower tuition. I got a full ride to the University of Colorado's design program, a scholarship that covered tuition fees and even a stipend for housing and materials. It was a huge achievement, the kind of thing most families would celebrate. My parents' response was lukewarm at best. "That's good," Dad said when I told them. "At least you won't be a financial burden." The implication hung in the air. Unlike Pearl, who they were already planning to fully fund through whatever college she eventually chose, despite her barely scraping by with a 2.8 gigapascals and 0 extracurricular achievements. They'd already started a college fund for her, something they'd never done for me. When I asked about it, Dad said, "You've always been so independent. Pearl needs more support." I moved to the university dorms 3 weeks after my 18th birthday, with everything I owned packed into my 15-year-old Honda Civic. My parents helped me unload, but left after an hour because Pearl had a friend coming over. My roommate's entire family stayed the whole day, taking us to lunch, helping us organize the room, taking photos, crying when they finally left. I watched them, feeling a hollow ache in my chest that had become all too familiar. College was freedom. For the first time in my life, I was evaluated purely on my merit, my talent, my effort. My professors loved me. My designs were innovative and thoughtful. I won internal competitions, was selected for prestigious internships, and built a portfolio that was genuinely impressive. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3 juggling classes, and work and barely sleeping, but I was happy in a way I'd never been at home. I called my parents once a week out of obligation more than desire. The conversations were always the same. Mom would update me on Pearl's life for 20 minutes, barely asking about mine. If I tried to share something about my studies or my work, she'd listen for maybe 30 seconds before finding a way to redirect the conversation back to Pearl. Pearl had a new boyfriend. Pearl made the volleyball team. Pearl was thinking about majoring in business or communications or maybe fashion, she wasn't sure yet. Pearl. My sophomore year, something shifted. I'd just finished a major project, a redesign of a historic building that my professor called some of the best student work he'd seen in 20 years. I was exhausted, exhilarated, proud of myself in a way I rarely allowed. I called home wanting to share the news. Mom answered. "Hi, honey," she said, distracted. I could hear her typing. "How are classes?" "Really good, actually. I just finished this major project and my professor said it was exceptional. He's recommending me for this summer internship at a firm in Chicago that rarely takes students this early." "That's nice, sweetie. Listen, I need to talk to you about something." Pearl's car broke down, and it's going to cost $2,200 to fix. Your father and I are stretched thin right now with some unexpected expenses. Could you help out? I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, trying to process the whiplash. I just told you about a major achievement and you immediately asked me for money. Don't be dramatic, royalty. This is what family does. We help each other. You have that scholarship money. That money is for school supplies and living expenses. You have jobs. You can spare some. Pearl needs her car for school. Pearl was living at home attending community college half-time because she couldn't handle a full course load. She didn't need a car. She wanted a car. There was a difference, but pointing that out was useless. I'm not giving you money for Pearl's car. Silence. Then in a voice that could freeze water, I see. So you're too good to help your family now. That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said. You'd rather hoard your money than help your sister. That's very selfish, royalty. I thought we raised you better than that. The guilt trip was masterful, honed by years of practice. And God help me, it worked. I sent them $1,500, which was most of what I had saved for my summer expenses. They fixed Pearl's car. She posted photos of it on Instagram, with captions about grateful for all the blessings in my life, without mentioning me once. My parents never thanked me either. That was the first time, but it wasn't the last. Over the next few years, the requests became more frequent. Could I help with the mortgage? They'd had an unexpected expense. Could I contribute to Pearl's tuition? She'd decided to transfer to a 4-year school. Could I help with their property taxes? Business had been slow. Always asked. Never demanded. But with enough guilt layered on that, saying no felt impossible. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in architectural design and a job offer before I'd even walked across the stage. A prestigious firm in Denver wanted me, offering a salary that seemed impossible for someone just starting out. I'd done 3 internships, built connections, and had a portfolio that spoke for itself. I was 22 years old and starting my career on a trajectory most designers didn't see until their 30s. My parents came to my graduation. They sat in the back left immediately after the ceremony ended and didn't attend the department reception where I was being honored with multiple awards. Pearl had a hair appointment. They needed to drive her. I moved to Denver, got a small but nice apartment, and threw myself into work. I was good at what I did, really good. Within 6 months, I was leading small projects. Within a year, I was being trusted with major clients. My designs were featured in local publications. I won awards. I made good money. And every single month without fail, someone from my family needed something. Pearl decided she wanted to open a nail salon. She'd taken exactly 0 business classes, had no experience in the beauty industry, beyond getting her own nails done, and had no business plan beyond. I think it would be fun. But she wanted it, which meant my parents wanted it for her, which meant I was expected to fund it. The ask came during a family dinner I'd driven 3 hours to attend. Pearl laid out her vision with the enthusiasm of someone who'd never been told no in her life. She wanted a high-end salon in Boulder's nicest shopping district. She'd already picked out the location, talked to the landlord, and designed the interior in her head. She just needed startup capital. How much are you asking for? I said, already knowing I wasn't going to like the answer. $60,000, Pearl said casually, as if she was asking to borrow $20. But it's an investment. Once the salon is successful, I'll pay you back with interest. I looked at my parents. Dad was nodding enthusiastically. Mom was looking at me expectantly. They'd already decided this was happening. They were just waiting for me to agree. That's a lot of money, Pearl. Have you written a business plan? Done market research. Talked to any business advisors? She rolled her eyes. I don't need all that formal stuff. I know what people want. I've been getting my nails done for years. That's not the same as running a business. Are you saying I can't do it? Her voice took on that edge, the one that signaled she was about to make me the villain. Are you saying I'm not smart enough? I'm saying that opening a business without proper planning is risky. Your sister is asking for your help, Dad interjected. The least you can do is be supportive. I am being supportive. I'm trying to make sure she succeeds. By being condescending, Pearl's eyes filled with tears right on cue. I should have known you'd do this. You've always looked down on me. The evening dissolved into accusations and guilt trips and emotional manipulation. By the end of it, I'd agreed to give Pearl $40,000 less than she wanted, but still more than I should have given. I told myself it would be different this time. She'd promised to pay me back. She'd promised this was a real plan. She'd promised she'd take it seriously. I should have known better. Within 2 months of opening, Luxe Nails by Pearl was already struggling. Pearl had spent most of the startup money on expensive decorations and high-end furniture, leaving barely enough for inventory and marketing. She'd hired her friends who had zero work ethic and spent more time on their phones than actually working. Her prices were too high for the market. Her customer service was terrible because Pearl treated it like a hobby, not a business. She'd come in late, leave early, take days off without notice. I watched from afar as the reviews rolled in. 1 star, 2 stars. Complaints about wait times, unprofessional behavior, mediocre service. I tried to offer advice, but Pearl took it as criticism. She blocked me on social media after I gently suggested she might need to be more present at her own business. When the salon started losing money, she came back asking for more. Another $10,000. Just to get through the rough patch. I said no. That's when my parents got involved. I started getting calls, texts, emails about how I was sabotaging Pearl's dream, how I'd set her up to fail by not giving her enough money, how I was jealous of her success. The gaslighting was so complete, so absolute that I started to doubt myself. Maybe I hadn't given her enough. Maybe I should have been more involved. Maybe this was my fault. My therapist, Dr. Sarah Matthews, whom I'd started seeing because the anxiety and depression were becoming unmanageable, had a different perspective. "Let me ask you something," she said during one session when I was particularly deep in the guilt spiral. "If a complete stranger asked you for $40,000 for a business with no plan, no experience, and no accountability, would you give it to them?" Of course not. So why do you give it to your family? Because they're family. And what does family mean to you, royalty? I opened my mouth to answer and realized I didn't know. Family was supposed to mean love, support, acceptance. But my family meant obligation, guilt, and constant demands. We sat with that realization for a long moment. "I think, Dr. Matthews said gently, that you've been conditioned to believe that your value lies in what you can provide, not in who you are. And I think your family has been happy to maintain that belief because it benefits them." Over the next year, I worked with Dr. Matthews on understanding boundaries, recognizing manipulation, and building self-worth that wasn't tied to other people's approval. It was hard, brutal work. There were sessions where I cried so hard I couldn't speak. There were breakthroughs that felt like earthquakes shaking the foundation of everything I'd believed about myself and my family. I started saying no. Small no's at first. "No, I can't drive home this weekend. I have plans." "No, I can't cover that expense. I have my own bills." The reaction was immediate and explosive. I was selfish. I was cruel. I was abandoning my family. The guilt trips intensified. My mother's phone calls became lectures about ingratitude. My father sent long emails about responsibility and family obligation. Pearl alternated between attacking me on social media and sending tearful voice messages about how much she needed her big sister. But I held firm, and something miraculous happened. My anxiety decreased. My depression lifted. I started sleeping better. I had money in my savings account for the first time in years. I went on a vacation just for myself to New Mexico. I took a pottery class just because it sounded fun. I started dating someone without immediately worrying about how my family would react. I was learning what it felt like to live for myself, instead of as an extension of other people's needs. Pearl's salon failed spectacularly 18 months after opening. She declared bankruptcy, owing money to vendors, employees, and the landlord. My $40,000 was long gone, spent on God knows what. She moved back in with my parents and immediately started planning her next venture, whatever that would be. I waited for her to acknowledge what had happened, to maybe thank me for trying to help or apologize for how it turned out. Nothing. Radio silence. Until she needed something else. When I turned 30, I'd been at the Denver firm for 8 years. I was a senior designer leading major projects, mentoring junior designers, and making a very comfortable living. I'd also been saving, aggressively planning for something I'd been dreaming about since I was 16 years old. I wanted to move to Los Angeles. The design scene there was incredible, full of innovation and opportunity and possibilities that Denver couldn't match. I'd been networking, making connections, and building a reputation that was starting to reach beyond Colorado. That's when I got the offer. Marcus Chen, a legend in the architectural design world, had seen my work featured in Architecture Digest. He ran one of the most prestigious boutique firms in Los Angeles, the kind of place where careers were made. He wanted to meet with me about a position. I flew out for the interview, which went phenomenally. By the end of the day, he offered me a job as a design director, a title usually reserved for people with 15 plus years of experience. The salary was nearly double what I was making in Denver. It was everything I'd been working toward. I accepted immediately. I gave notice at my firm, who were disappointed but not surprised. I found an apartment in Silver Lake with a view of the hills. I planned my move for early December, giving myself time to settle before the holidays. And then, because I was still operating from that old place of hope, I decided to tell my family in person. I drove to Boulder on a cold Saturday in November. My parents were home along with Pearl and her daughter Ellie, who was now 8 years old. Ellie was the one bright spot in the family, a sweet kid who'd inherited none of Pearl's nastiness. I brought lunch from their favorite deli, set it out on the kitchen table, and gathered everyone around. "I have some exciting news," I said, unable to keep the smile off my face. "I got offered an incredible job in Los Angeles. I'm moving next month." The silence was deafening. Then my mother spoke. "You're moving across the country," her tone was accusatory, not excited. "To California, yes. This is a huge opportunity. I'll be working for Marcus Chen. He's one of the most respected designers in the world." "What about us?" Pearl said, her voice sharp. "What about you? What are we supposed to do without you here?" I stared at her. "You'll do what you've always done. I'm 3 hours away now and I barely see you." "That's because you're always too busy for family," Mom said. Dad cleared his throat. "This seems very sudden, Royalty. Are you sure you've thought this through? California is expensive. Do you really think this is wise?" "I've been planning this for years. And yes, it's expensive, but the salary more than compensates." "Well, that's very nice for you," Mom said, her tone dripping with something I couldn't quite identify. "It must be nice to just abandon your family and run off to chase some fantasy." "I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm pursuing my career." "You're being selfish," Pearl snapped. "You know we depend on you. What about when we need help with something?" And there it was. The real concern. Not that they'd miss me. Not that they were proud of me. But that I wouldn't be available to solve their problems and fund their lifestyle. Something inside me went cold and hard. I looked around the table at their faces. My mother resentful and cold. My father disappointed that I was making a choice he didn't approve. Pearl angry that her personal ATM was moving out of easy reach. Only Ellie looked genuinely sad, and that was because she was a kid who didn't understand the dysfunction around her. "You know what," I said quietly. "I came here hoping you'd be happy for me. That just once you'd celebrate my success instead of making it about how it affects you. But that was stupid of me. You've never been happy for me. Not once in my entire life." "That's not true," Mom protested. "We've always supported you. You didn't come to my award ceremonies. You forgot my birthdays. You took my scholarship money. You've asked me for thousands of dollars over the years and never paid back a cent. That's not support. That's exploitation." "How dare you," Dad started, but I held up my hand. "I'm not done. Pearl, I gave you $40,000 for a business you ran into the ground through sheer laziness and incompetence. You never thanked me. You never apologized. You just moved on to the next thing like nothing happened. And when I tried to set boundaries to have any kind of life of my own, you all acted like I was committing some kind of betrayal." "You are being dramatic," Pearl said, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. "No, I'm being honest for the first time in my life. I've spent 30 years trying to earn your love, your approval, your basic respect. And I'm done. I'm moving to Los Angeles and I'm doing it guilt-free because I don't owe you anything. Not my money, not my time, and definitely not my future." I stood up, grabbed my purse, and headed for the door. Behind me, they erupted. Shouting, accusations, threats. My mother's voice rang out above the others. "If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back. You're not welcome here anymore." I turned back one last time. "That's the first honest thing you've said to me in years." I left. I drove back to Denver with tears streaming down my face, but also with a strange sense of lightness. I'd finally said the things I'd needed to say for decades. And the world didn't end. The weeks leading up to my move were filled with radio silence from my family, which was honestly a relief. I packed up my Denver apartment, said goodbye to friends and colleagues, and drove west toward my new life. The day I crossed into California, I pulled over at a rest stop and just sat there for a while watching the desert landscape and feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Los Angeles was everything I needed it to be. The work was challenging, the team was brilliant, and Marcus Chen was not just a boss but a mentor in the truest sense. He saw my talent, pushed me to grow, and created opportunities for me to shine. Within months, I was leading major projects. Within a year, I was being featured in design publications and invited to speak at industry conferences. But more than the professional success, I found something I hadn't expected. Community. Real, genuine relationships built on mutual respect and reciprocity. Rachel from the marketing firm in my building became my best friend, introducing me to her circle of successful independent women who supported each other without keeping score. I started dating a kind, emotionally available man named James, who thought my dedication to my career was attractive, not threatening. I found a running group, tried surfing, took a screenwriting class just for fun. I built a life that was mine, fully and completely mine. For almost 18 months, my family left me completely alone. No calls, no texts, no social media interactions. Through my cousin Sarah, the only family member I stayed in contact with, I heard bits and pieces. Pearl was working retail. My parents were having some financial struggles, but nothing catastrophic. Life was going on without me, which was exactly what I needed. Then, everything fell apart for them all at once. It started with my father. He'd always been a gambler, something I'd known but hadn't fully understood the scope of. He liked the casinos, the sports betting, the poker games with his buddies. My mother had always downplayed it as harmless fun, but it wasn't harmless. Over the years, he'd been hiding losses, taking out loans, making increasingly desperate financial decisions to chase his losses. In March of my second year in LA, it all came crashing down. Dad had taken out a second mortgage on the house without telling Mom. He'd borrowed against his 401k. He'd run up enormous credit card debt. And he'd made a series of spectacularly bad investments in a friend's startup that turned out to be essentially a scam. When the dust settled, my parents were over $300,000 in debt. The house I'd helped pay for multiple times over the years, was in foreclosure. Pearl's situation was somehow worse. After the nail salon failure, she'd bounced between retail jobs, never lasting more than a few months anywhere. She had no savings, no skills, and no work ethic. She'd been living with our parents rent-free, which worked until they couldn't afford to keep the house. But Pearl had also been hiding something. She'd gotten involved with a man named Derek, who seemed charming, but was actually dealing drugs. When he got arrested suddenly, Pearl was implicated. Not enough to face charges, but enough that she was on the police radar. Her car got repossessed. Her credit was destroyed. And she had an 8-year-old daughter depending on her. I found out all of this through Sarah, who called me one evening in late May. "I think you should know what's going on," she said carefully. "I know you don't want to be involved, and I respect that, but some of this affects Ellie, and I thought you'd want to know." She laid it all out. The financial catastrophe. The house in foreclosure. Pearl's legal troubles and terrible choices in men. And most concerningly, Ellie, the kid was essentially raising herself. Pearl was gone most days and nights, leaving Ellie alone or with whoever would watch her. My parents were so consumed with their own crisis, they barely noticed their granddaughter was being neglected. Ellie was missing school, showing up in dirty clothes, clearly not being fed properly. "CPS has been called twice," Sarah said quietly. "So far nothing's come of it, but royalty, that kid is not okay." That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wrestling with what I should do. These people had hurt me, used me, discarded me. They'd made it clear I wasn't welcome in their lives. I owed them nothing. But Ellie was innocent in all of this. She was a child suffering because of adult dysfunction, and I knew exactly what that felt like. I called Sarah back the next morning. "I need you to keep me updated on Ellie specifically, not the adults. I don't care what happens to them. But if that little girl is in danger, I need to know." For the next 3 months, I monitored the situation from afar. Sarah kept me informed. Ellie's situation deteriorated. She was losing weight. Her teachers were filing reports. She'd been caught stealing food from the school cafeteria. Pearl was barely functioning, spiraling into depression and denial. My parents were so deep in their own crisis, they couldn't see what was happening right in front of them. Then I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Aunt Royalty. The voice was small, scared, and heartbreakingly familiar. "Ellie, honey, is that you?" "Yes." I could hear her trying not to cry. "I'm sorry to call you. Mom doesn't know I have your number. I found it in Grandma's phone and I wrote it down. Please don't be mad." "I'm not mad, sweetheart." "What's wrong?" "Everything." And then she broke, sobbing so hard she could barely speak. Nobody takes care of me anymore. Mom is always gone, and when she's home, she just sleeps. Grandma and Grandpa fight all the time about money. There's no food in the house. I'm hungry and I'm scared and I don't know what to do. My heart shattered into a million pieces. Ellie listened to me very carefully. Are you safe right now? Is anyone hurting you? No one hits me. But no one feeds me either. No one makes sure I go to school. No one tucks me in. I'm just alone all the time and I'm so tired, Aunt Royalty. I'm so tired of being alone. I was already pulling up flights on my laptop, looking at red eyes that night. Baby, I need you to be brave for me. Can you do that? I think so. I'm coming to get you. I don't know exactly how yet, but I promise you I'm going to fix this. You're not going to be alone anymore. Really, the hope in her voice destroyed me. Really. But Ellie, I need you to do something for me. I need you to write down everything that's been happening. Every time you're left alone, every time there's no food, every time you feel unsafe. Can you do that? Like a diary. Exactly like a diary. And keep it hidden. This is just between us for now, okay? Okay. And Ellie, I love you. I know we haven't spent much time together, but I love you and I'm not going to let you down. I promise. She started crying again, but it sounded different. Like relief. I love you too, Aunt Royalty. Please hurry. I booked a flight for the next morning. I called the best family lawyer in Los Angeles and paid for an emergency consultation. I called Sarah and asked her to document everything she could. And then I called Marcus. I need some time off, I said. It's a family emergency. Take what you need, he said immediately. Is there anything I can do? Not right now. But Marcus, if I ask you later, would you be willing to be a character witness for me? Absolutely. Whatever you need. The next 36 hours were a blur. I flew to Denver, drove straight to Boulder, and went directly to the house my parents were about to lose. I knocked on the door. My mother answered. The shock on her face would have been comical under different circumstances. Royalty. What are you doing here? I'm here for Ellie. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that you're all so consumed with your own drama that you've completely neglected a 10-year-old child. Where is she? She's at school. Mom's defensiveness was immediate. Really? Because according to her school's records, she's missed 14 days this month alone. She's been sick. She's been unsupervised and unfed. Where's Pearl? I don't know. She doesn't tell me where she goes anymore. And Dad? He's not here either. I pushed past her into the house. It was worse than I'd imagined. The place was filthy, cluttered with unpacked boxes and random belongings. The fridge was nearly empty. Bills and past due notices covered the kitchen table. This was the house I'd helped pay for, now falling apart because of poor decisions and refusal to take responsibility. You need to leave, Mom said, but there was no conviction in her voice. I'm not going anywhere. In fact, I'm taking Ellie with me. You can't just take her. Pearl won't allow it. Pearl doesn't have a choice. I've already spoken with a lawyer. I'm filing for emergency custody based on documented neglect. I have school records testimony from teachers and Ellie's own account of what's been happening here. My mother's face went white. You called CPS on us. I called a lawyer. CPS has already been called twice by mandated reporters. I'm just making sure Ellie has somewhere safe to go when they finally intervene. Because they will intervene, Mom. This situation is unsustainable and illegal. How dare you? After everything we've done for you. I laughed, a harsh sound without humor. What exactly have you done for me? Name one thing. One single thing that wasn't either the bare minimum of parental obligation or something you later used to manipulate me. She couldn't answer. We stood there in that disaster of a kitchen, the weight of 32 years of dysfunction hanging between us. I'm picking Ellie up from school, I said finally. I'll be taking her back to Los Angeles with me. If you want to contest this, you're welcome to try. But I have resources, documentation, and most importantly, I actually care about that child's well-being. Can you say the same? Pearl will fight you. Let her try. Pearl can't take care of herself, let alone a kid. And you two are about to be homeless. The court will see that. Any judge will see that. I walked out, drove to Ellie's school, and signed her out, claiming a family emergency. The relief on her face when she saw me made everything worth it. She ran into my arms and held on like I was a life raft in a storm. Maybe I was. Am I really coming with you? She whispered. You really are. Go get your stuff from your classroom. We're leaving today. We drove back to the house where I packed Ellie's belongings, which fit into 2 small suitcases and a backpack. That's how little she had. Pearl showed up while we were loading the car, Derek in tow, looking strung out and aggressive. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Pearl shrieked. "I'm taking Ellie somewhere safe." "You can't take my daughter." "Watch me. You've been neglecting her for months. I have documentation. I have witnesses. And most importantly, I have Ellie's own testimony about what she's been living through." Pearl turned to Ellie, who was sitting in my car. "Get out of that car right now." Ellie shrank back, shaking her head. "I want to go with Aunt Royalty. I'm your mother." "You're never here," Ellie's voice cracked. "You don't make me food. You don't help with my homework. You don't tuck me in. Aunt Royalty called me and she listened, and she cares about me." "When have you cared?" Pearl's face crumpled, but it wasn't sadness. It was rage. "You turned my daughter against me. I didn't have to turn her against you. You did that all by yourself through years of neglect." I got into the driver's seat. "My lawyer will be in touch." Derek stepped forward menacingly, but I was already backing out. The last thing I saw was Pearl screaming in the driveway while Derek tried to calm her down, and my parents watching from the doorway looking old and defeated. The drive back to Los Angeles took 12 hours because we stopped frequently for food bathroom breaks, and once because Ellie had a panic attack and needed time to calm down. We didn't talk much. She was processing and I was giving her space. But every time I looked over at her, curled up in the passenger seat, I felt a sense of rightness I hadn't felt in years. The legal battle that followed was brutal. Pearl hired a lawyer she couldn't afford, probably funded by my parents scraping together whatever they could. They painted me as a vindictive woman trying to steal a child out of spite. They claimed I'd abandoned the family and was now trying to destroy it. They brought up every time I'd said no to giving them money, framing it as evidence of my selfishness. But I had something they didn't. Facts. Documentation. Character witnesses. Marcus wrote a letter about my stability and character. Rachel did the same. My therapist provided professional assessment of my emotional fitness. Ellie's teachers provided testimony about her deteriorating condition while in Pearl's care. The school counselor testified about the concerns she'd repeatedly raised. Sarah provided an outsider's perspective on the family dysfunction. And then there was Ellie herself. At 10 years old, she had to sit in front of a judge and explain why she felt unsafe with her mother. She had to detail the neglect, the fear, the loneliness. She had to show the diary I'd asked her to keep. It was the bravest thing I'd ever seen anyone do. The judge was a woman in her 50s who'd probably seen every variation of family dysfunction imaginable. She reviewed all the evidence, listened to all the testimony, and asked Ellie directly what she wanted. "I want to live with Aunt Royalty," Ellie said clearly. "She makes me feel safe. She makes me feel like I matter." The judge granted me temporary custody pending a full hearing in 6 months. Pearl was given supervised visitation rights contingent on her completing parenting classes and maintaining stable employment and housing. My parents could petition for grandparent visitation but would need to go through official channels. The day I officially gained custody of Ellie was one of the best days of my life. We celebrated with ice cream and a trip to Disneyland because she'd never been, and every kid deserves that magic. Watching her face light up on the ride, seeing her laugh without fear or worry, I knew I'd made the right choice. The next 3 years were transformative. Ellie thrived in Los Angeles. She enrolled in a great school where teachers actually noticed and cared about her. She made friends. She joined the art program and discovered she had real talent, inheriting the creative genes that had somehow skipped Pearl entirely. She started therapy to work through the trauma of her early years. She grew taller, healthier, happier. She started calling me Mom. I'd waited until she brought it up first, not wanting to pressure her or erase Pearl entirely. But one night when she was 12, she asked, "Would it be okay if I called you Mom instead of Aunt Royalty?" "Are you sure?" I asked carefully. "Pearl gave birth to me, but you're the one who mothers me. That makes you my mom." I cried. She cried. We hugged for a long time. The next morning at breakfast, she said, "Good morning, Mom," and my heart nearly burst. My career continued to flourish. I made partner at the firm, one of the youngest people to ever achieve that position. My designs won national awards. I was invited to speak at conferences around the world. But none of it meant as much as watching Ellie grow into a confident, creative, loving young person who knew her worth. As for my original family, the aftermath was everything I'd predicted and worse. My parents lost the house to foreclosure and had to move into a small 2-bedroom apartment in a less desirable part of Boulder. Dad's gambling problem finally came fully to light during the legal proceedings, and Mom filed for divorce. He moved into a studio apartment alone, his health deteriorating from stress and poor choices. Pearl bounced between jobs and relationships, never staying anywhere long enough to build stability. She showed up for exactly 3 of her supervised visits with Ellie in the first year, then stopped coming at all. Ellie was hurt at first, then angry, then finally just sad. We worked through it in therapy. I never badmouthed Pearl to Ellie, never tried to turn her against her biological mother. I didn't have to. Pearl's actions spoke for themselves. The last time I heard from any of them was 2 years ago. It was a message from my father on LinkedIn of all places. A long, rambling message about regrets and wanting to reconnect and hoping I could find it in my heart to forgive. It was manipulative, even in its supposed vulnerability filled with justifications and deflections and subtle guilt trips. I read it once, then deleted it without responding. Some people think that makes me cruel, that I should give them another chance, that family is family, that forgiveness is important. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am cruel. But I'm also healthy, happy, and thriving. Ellie is healthy, happy, and thriving. The life we've built together, the family we've chosen, is full of love and support and reciprocity. I have friends who show up for me. I have a partner now, a wonderful man named David, who treats both me and Ellie with respect and genuine care. I have work that fulfills me. I have a community that values me. I don't need my parents' approval anymore. I don't need Pearl's acknowledgement. I don't need anything from them because I've built something better without them. This Christmas, Ellie and I made ornaments together. She designed them beautiful, intricate pieces that showcase her growing talent. We gave them to Rachel and her family, to Marcus and his wife Lisa, to David and his parents, to our neighbors, to Ellie's teachers. We made the season about giving to people who value the thought and effort, about celebrating chosen family, about gratitude for the life we've built. On Christmas Eve, Ellie found me looking at that one ornament I'd saved from that terrible night 3 years ago. It's cracked but intact, a symbol of everything I survived and everything I built from those broken pieces. "Are you sad?" she asked. "No," I said honestly. "I'm grateful. That night was the beginning of my real life. Of us." She hugged me tight. "I'm glad you didn't give up. I'm glad you called me that night. You saved me as much as I saved you." We hung the cracked ornament on our tree right in front. A reminder that broken things can still be beautiful, that endings can become beginnings, that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. That family isn't about blood, it's about who shows up, who stays, who loves you unconditionally. I'm not going to tell you that I never think about my family, that there aren't moments when I grieve the family I wish I'd had. But I don't regret my choices. I don't regret standing up for myself, setting boundaries, and refusing to be used anymore. I don't regret saving Ellie from repeating the same cycle. I don't regret choosing peace over dysfunction, love over obligation, health over guilt. I built a new family. One based on mutual respect, genuine love, and reciprocity. Rachel and her kids, Marcus and Lisa, David and his parents, James, who remained a dear friend even after we stopped dating, my colleagues who have become my chosen siblings, and most importantly, Ellie. These are my people. This is my family. And they see me, value me, and love me, not for what I can give them, but for who I am. The most powerful thing I learned is this: you can't change people who don't want to change. You can't make people value you who are determined not to. But you can change yourself. You can decide that your peace matters more than their comfort. You can choose yourself even when it feels impossible. That's not selfish. That's survival. That's self-respect. That's knowing your worth. My parents will never apologize. Pearl will never acknowledge what she did. And that's okay. I don't need their validation anymore. I don't need them to finally see my value. I see it. Ellie sees it. The people who matter see it. And honestly, that's enough. So here's my question for you. Have you ever had to make the choice between your own well-being and a toxic relationship? Have you ever had to decide that loving yourself meant disappointing someone else? Drop your story in the comments. Let's talk about it. Because the more we share these stories, the more we realize we're not alone in this struggle. And if this story resonated with you, if you've been that person trying to earn love that should have been freely given, if you're still trying to figure out if you have the right to choose yourself, hit that like button. Subscribe, because I share stories about finding strength, setting boundaries, and building the life you actually deserve. Your engagement helps others find these stories when they need them most. Remember, your worth isn't determined by the people who couldn't see it. It's determined by you and the people wise enough to recognize what they have. You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. You are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to build something better. That's not the end of anything. It's the beginning of everything.